Thank you very much. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the fifth high-level meeting on South-South cooperation. This afternoon, we will hold our thematic discussion on the agenda item accelerating the achievement of the SDGs through the effective implementation of the outcome document adopted at the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation, BAPA plus 40, while responding to the COVID disease pandemic and other similar global crises. The thematic debate is to be an interactive discussion on strategies, focus, and mechanisms for South-South and triangular cooperation, which are necessary so that we can move forward in achieving the SDGs at the national, sub-regional, regional, and global levels. That being said, and in the current circumstances, it will be more important than ever to look at international proposals for cooperation and how to finance them in order to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and its socio-impact and environmental impact in all developing countries. Countries of the Global South must work together regionally and globally in adopting an approach which will promote multidimensional criteria to provide a comprehensive approach to development in accordance with Agenda 2030. Financial support and non-financial support continue to remain vital in order to bolster our efforts and support processes and avoid compromising our progress towards the achievement of the SDGs. We will listen closely to the distinguished panelists who will speak about practical approaches to guarantee resilient and balanced recovery from COVID-19, the role of the United Nations and its entities, good practices of countries of the South in capacity building, and the impact of regional and international cooperation, and the successful efforts of South-South and triangular cooperation to ensure fair and inclusive access to vaccines, treatment, diagnosis, and affordable medical care. And they will also share their vision of the process of recovery and how this relates to our economic recovery as well. The UN Office for South-South Cooperation, with the support of the office which I chair, has a panel of recognized individuals who are well versed in this area, and they will lead our discussions. Our panelists represent the member states, UN agencies, intergovernmental organizations, and civil society organizations. Our moderator today is Ms. Pamela Koch-Hamilton, Executive Director of the International Trade Center. Ms. Pamela Koch-Hamilton has a breadth of experience and expertise in trade-related capacity building and sustainable development issues in organizations ranging from the International Trade Center and the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, to the Jamaican government, the Caribbean Forum in trade negotiations, and multilateral institutions, including the OAS and the Inter-American Development Bank and the Caribbean Export Development Agency, where she worked to strengthen the private sector and micro, small, and medium enterprises by promoting investment. Ms. Cook-Hamilton also established the platform We Export, empowered women through exports to address the disadvantages that women-owned firms experience in accessing markets. During this session, I am sure we will gain excellent insights on approaches to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. And in this way, we can work towards targeted interventions and approaches to inclusive green growth and green economy. I will now give the floor to Ms. Coke-Hamilton to moderate the thematic discussion of the 20th session of the High-Level Committee. You have the floor, Pamela.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Excellency Ms. Maria del Carmen Squef, current representative of Argentina to the United Nations and President High-Level Committee, for your opening remarks and for setting this session on a good course to discuss ways to harness South-South and triangular cooperation to recover better, greener, and fairer from COVID-19. Good afternoon and good evening, Excellencies, distinguished guests, delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and pleasure to moderate this thematic discussion on accelerating the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals through the effective implementation of the Buenos Aires Outcome Document of the Second High-Level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation while responding to the coronavirus disease, the pandemic as they call it, and similar global crises. This discussion comes at an opportune time. In April 2020, the global community renewed its commitment to harnessing South-South cooperation for sustainable development. However, we did not foresee the coming crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare and exacerbated existing fault lines in our economy and society. What we address here is not a day too late, but we must act quickly and decisively if we hope to have a shot at recovery. Today, more than ever, the United Nations has an even more critical role to play in supporting a recovery that is fair, inclusive, and people-centered. It also calls on us to be innovative and take lessons from what we have collectively faced this past year. Today, we will focus on South-South cooperation. Its evolution has been impressive, but the pandemic has reduced and in some respects reversed these impressive trends. We're currently grappling with a confluence of crises: political, social, environmental, and economic. We continue to see devastating impacts on livelihoods, productivity, and gender equality. Poverty has risen for the first time in over a decade, with around 124 million people being pushed back into extreme poverty. And human development is witnessing its first reversal in 30 years. Gains in gender equality and gender equity are being erased. However, we also recognize that prior to the pandemic, progress towards the SDGs was not what we would have hoped. Our efforts have not been sufficient to meet our collective commitment to the SDGs by 2030. We are in dire need of accessible financing mechanisms, especially for developing countries. Unfortunately, we have seen these finance and investment sources shrink as government revenue contracted in 2020. Development assistance and traditional aid for trade are in trouble, and the expected role that the private sector was to play in filling that gap has not been realized. Looking to the pandemic's impact on trade, ITC's newly launched Trade Brief series revealed that trade recovery is taking up speed across all sectors, regions, and development levels. Developing countries' exports grew by 34% in March 2021 compared to a year earlier. However, 211 COVID-19 related trade measures remain in place, many of which are restricting the global south's access to life-saving vaccines and other medical supplies. With the forthcoming issues, we will see if these protectionist forces continue or if countries eventually repeal the measures that were meant to be of a temporary nature. Another critical challenge we must tackle is climate change, the implications of which go far beyond what we can imagine. From increased frequency and intensity of hurricanes and typhoons in the Caribbean and the Pacific, to increased desertification in Africa, from salinization of precious freshwater sources in small islands to raging forest fires in the Amazon. The heightened environmental and economic insecurity serves a backdrop to increased armed conflicts which threaten vulnerable communities and leaves them more vulnerable still. This has a direct impact on the well-being of our economies and our populations. This has a direct impact on the ability of our communities to feed and support themselves. This has a direct impact on the opportunities for education, proper healthcare, and inclusive economic growth, which are now in jeopardy. There's a clear and unrelenting urgency to accelerate our efforts to achieve the SDGs. I believe that South-South cooperation, while certainly not new, can be one of those innovative drivers of future growth that we need. South-South and triangular cooperation are important modalities for sustainable development. Its catalytic role has been recognized in the SDGs and reflected in major multilateral outcomes such as the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Samoa Pathway, the Vienna Program of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries, the Istanbul Program of Action for the Least Developed Countries, and the Buenos Aires Outcome Document of the Second High-Level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation, the BAPA Plus 40. I also expect it to form a central part of the discussions at LDC 5 next year. The United Nations Secretary General, in his report on the state of South-South cooperation to the General Assembly, requested the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, the UNOSC, to design a system-wide strategy in consultation with UN agencies. It is clear that a focused, solutions-driven, and measurable South-South cooperation strategy is one of the pillars of building forward better and bolder. These initiatives serve as the main thrust for our efforts to tackle the array of interlinked and complex issues. The United Nations system needs to be more strategic, agile, collaborative, and results-oriented at all levels, national, regional, and global. As such, the United Nations system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development 2021 to 2024 should seek to be fit for purpose and actionable in order to provide concrete results. It must recognize that South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation will be one of the most important partnerships in driving transfer of green technology to small island developing states. It will be a critical conduit in sharing expertise on climate-smart agriculture with least developed countries. It will help develop policies in landlocked or land-linked developing countries that can use technology and digital means to address their vulnerabilities. Channeled correctly, South-South cooperation can be transformational. ITC looks forward to actively contributing to this process. As a global community, we now have an opportunity to strengthen the focus of South-South cooperation on Agenda 2030 as our North Star, the blueprint to guide an innovative and integrated response and recovery from COVID-19. There are countries, communities, companies, and organizations that already harness South-South and triangular cooperation for a fairer and greener economy and society. Today, we're lucky to have with us an exceptional panel of highly accomplished leaders who have blazed many trails and are leading efforts in their home countries and globally to harness South-South and triangular cooperation to build back better. First, we have His Excellency Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, MP, Foreign Minister, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Secondly, we have His Excellency Mr. Mantas Adamenas, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania. Thirdly on our list and our panel is Ms. Alicia Barcena, Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. We also have with us the pleasure, actually, he will give us a pre-recorded video, is Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General, World Health Organization. And finally, we have Ms. Elizabeth Cedaropolis, Chief Executive of the South African Institute of International Affairs. Panelist remarks, we hope, firstly, I'd like to invite each of our panel members to share their perspectives on our theme. We will then open the floor for an interactive discussion with you, our audience. If any of the panelists spark an interesting question for you, please make a note of it for when we get to our discussion section. First of all, Your Excellency, Dr. Abdul Momen, we welcome your insights and experiences on South-South cooperation from the perspective of Bangladesh, particularly as the country gets ready to graduate from LDC status. Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Ambassador Maria del Carmen Squaf, President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, Honorable Foreign Minister of Lithuania, Madam Deputy Secretary General Ms. Amina Mohammed, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to deliver a keynote speech at this important thematic discussion on how South-South and triangular cooperation can contribute to the attainment of SDGs during this trying time of COVID-19 pandemic. Let me also take the opportunity to thank the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation for its great efforts in conveying this event. As requested, I will be pleased to share Bangladesh experiences on graduation from the group of least developed countries and highlight how countries in the South can advance cooperation among themselves, share knowledge, experiences, and best practices to address the challenges of COVID-19 and to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development for Common Prosperity. Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a severe impact all over the world. The challenges brought by the pandemic have given rise to new forms and expressions of solidarity. Hence, the importance of South-South cooperation as an effective forum of development cooperation has been growing. As such, more countries, both in the North and the South, are partnering to effectively use political, technical, and financial resources for development projects through triangular cooperation activities. However, sadly, in critical areas, there are disturbing stories. Cooperation is short of expectation. For example, although we know if all are not safe, no one is safe in this pandemic yet. As the President of the General Assembly said the other day, that the developing countries receive only 0.3% of these COVID vaccines, although overwhelming majority people live in developing countries and rest are with the development partners. The North-South cooperation model remains important, but it has gradually been losing its edge because of reluctance of cooperation by few countries at times. But South-South cooperation steadily has been receiving more profile with creative solutions as it is done through a broad framework of collaboration among countries of the South. Although only 6 developed countries till today have fulfilled their commitment of providing 0.7% of their GNI as ODA, development assistance and collaboration in the South is on the rise. South-South countries now account for more than half of the world's economic output, for almost half of the global trade, and their overall consumption by 2025 was estimated to exceed $30 trillion. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our forecast in all areas of the economy and the society. Ladies and gentlemen, you would agree that graduation of a country is a result of its long-term socio-economic progress, and under visionary leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we made this achievement. This moment came at a time when we are celebrating the birth centenary of the father of the nation of Bangladesh this year and the Golden Jubilee or independence in 2021. We have invested heavily on our people to lift them out of poverty and to make them empowered to carry out the development journey of the country. We took initiatives to build a human-centered, inclusive modern democracy as envisioned by our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Our government's Vision 2021 and Vision 2041 are two key instruments that have contributed to the commendable progress over the past decade. We are conscious that in the post-LDC graduation environment, along with new opportunities, there will be challenges towards sustainable transition. Bangladesh also is an extremely climate vulnerable country. On top of that, we are now hosting 1.1 million Rohingyas displaced from their homeland in Myanmar. However, as we embark on that journey, we believe that a robust South-South and triangular cooperation would address our huge development needs and challenges. Over the years, Bangladesh has been part of the global efforts to strengthen South-South cooperation through knowledge sharing. South-South and triangular cooperation played an important role in the remarkable development journey of Bangladesh. We have included South-South cooperation in our national policy for development cooperation. Under the visionary leadership of our Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, we have adopted various development solutions, while at the same time we have been sharing our ideas and lessons learned that have been well received and utilized by other South-South countries. Excellencies, the Access to Information A2I program of Bangladesh is currently leading 3 platforms following the South-South cooperation approaches to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, experiences, and best practices, and find innovative solutions. The UN Global Publication on Best Practices has incorporated 5 innovative development solutions of Bangladesh, which are Union Digital Center, SDG Tracker, Empathy Training, Service Innovation Fund, and Time Cost Visit Model of Public Service Delivery. Excellencies, the developed countries must take steps for accelerated technology transfer to the South. However, the developing countries also require stronger collaboration and partnership among themselves to close the technology gap existing within the South. There needs to be a more central role for the South in the international economic decision-making. Triangular support should promote Northern support for South-South cooperation endeavors. It should aim at capacity building of the South for its economic and social advancement and environmental sustainability. Similarly, the reformed United Nations Development System should undertake more activities to support South-South and triangular cooperation, taking into account national ownership, national leadership, and the country's specific needs. Many of you may kindly remember that during my participation in the second UN High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation, BAPA +40, in Buenos Aires in 2019, I proposed to establish a forum of development, finance, economic, and foreign ministers of the South to discuss, to engage in dialogue, and to explore the potentials as well as the critical issues of the South in the context of achieving the SDGs. I also proposed to establish a South-South Center on Knowledge and Innovation in Dhaka, Bangladesh, to provide a venue for interaction and the establishment of networks between relevant stakeholders of the developing countries in order to promote scientific cooperation, innovation, and capacity building. The Center on Knowledge and Innovation, which will leverage the existing systems, resources, and expertise in the area of knowledge and innovation, particularly in the wake of Fourth Industrial Revolution. It is my firm conviction that this kind of cooperation as an accelerator and multiplier can be the game changer for the Global South toward the achievement of SDGs. As a bold, innovative, and timely means to strengthen cooperation for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the global community should work together for people, planet, and of course for prosperity. Before I conclude, I would like to suggest the following in the area of South-South and triangular cooperation. First, enhance exchanges of experiences, knowledge, and development solutions among Southern countries' institutions and professional civil society, academia, and private sector organizations. Two, emphasize focus on areas where the South needs to look forward for joint investment. Three, building a mechanism to generate a solid financial strength to support partnerships where required, a common bank. Fourth, creating stronger triangular cooperation initiatives where countries from the South will invest or share best practices with other countries from the South, with financial and technical support by the countries from the North. Fifth, maximize efforts to gain global visibility and international recognition for the hard work done by the South. Sixth, enhance funding for more independent operation of the UNOSSC and helping countries from the South with seed money for different South-South cooperation projects. Seventh, and most importantly, establish a forum of South-South countries, finance, development, and foreign ministers to discuss, decide, explore their critical issues, strengths and weaknesses, and at least meet once annually, preferably during the high-level event of UN General Assembly. The UN Office of the South-South Cooperation should immediately take proactive initiatives in this regard to make it a reality. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you so much, His Excellency, for your very prescient points. I really think that what you've suggested now, these 7 points, are quite instructive and also on the cutting edge. So perhaps delegates can also think about it and see exactly how we should respond. I think the idea of enhancing funding for, of course, UNOSSC, and also building solid financial strength, as well as triangular cooperation, is always something that we must have as we continue on the South-South engagement. Next, we have Lithuania. We have His Excellency Mr. Mantas Adomėnas, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania. He will give us an insight on how to maximize the impact of international South-South and triangular cooperation. I'd like to call on the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania. Excellency, you now have the floor.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation held in Buenos Aires in 2019, known as BAPA+40, marked a new stage in the evolution of the development cooperation. At first, South-South cooperation was designed to be a modality of regional and sub-regional cooperation. Nevertheless, it was expanded to the scope of international process and now becomes global. The BAPA+40 outcome document provided a set of cooperation policy guidelines in order to foster implementation of Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, and to scale down the gap between developing and developed world. I am proud that Lithuania has facilitated the intergovernmental negotiations of this document. Ladies and gentlemen, nowadays, the South-South and triangular cooperation is a growing dimension of development cooperation, and the international community has experienced its benefit and realized its advantages. The South-South and triangular cooperation involves a vast range of participants and creates conditions for multi-stakeholder engagement. Involvement of different actors, such as public and private sector, civil society, scientific communities and academia, non-governmental organizations, must be ensured in accordance with the principle that no one is left behind. The BAPA Plus 40 outcome document is particularly considerate towards sharing of knowledge, experiences, and best practices. All the actors of the South-South and triangular cooperation must strive to close the existing knowledge gaps and to manage uneven access to solutions and resources, which is a major obstacle that hinder progress. Moreover, triangular cooperation creates trust, excludes the sense of inequality or subordination, and contributes to mutual understanding. Traditional donors get a chance to adopt good practices from the South-South cooperation, learn new ways of working together, and better understand the needs of developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the South-South and triangular cooperation is predominantly relevant under the current circumstances when COVID-19 pandemic has hit the world. Let me emphasize a few aspects in this regard. Firstly, once again, it has been proved that solidarity is crucial. Successful fight against pandemic is impossible without united efforts and broad consensus. Countries of the South should make use of existing mechanisms, such as the access to COVID-19 tools and COVAX, which have already proved their efficiency. To ensure equitable access to affordable, safe, and effective vaccines, diagnostics, and medicines, and to advance their development and production remains utmost important, as well as building resilient and sustainable health systems in accordance with One Health approach. Secondly, the subsequent socioeconomic crisis that affects all countries of the world, but especially developing countries, can be overcome if international community once again support the principles of multilateralism. The South-South and triangular cooperation has the potential to provide its contribution to the strengthening of multilateral system in order to build back better towards more resilient, inclusive, and green recovery. Thirdly, the global COVID-19 crisis highlighted the essential importance of digitalization and encouraged the adoption of digital technologies in all spheres of life, from the economy, trade, and service sector to health, education, and private life. Digitalization enables us to make positive new start into the future and must go alongside with strengthening of digital skills, closing the existing digital gap, and ensuring digital inclusivity. At the same time, providing data protection and online security. The South-South and triangular cooperation could usefully contribute to achieving real digital progress. International community shall not stop until everyone is connected. Ladies and gentlemen, the potential of South-South and triangular cooperation in the achievement of sustainable development goals must be further used. It is especially important now when the international community is fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and other complex challenges, such as climate change, hunger and malnutrition, eradication of poverty. Such scope of challenges threatens the Agenda 2030 and puts many most vulnerable people at risk for being left further behind. Therefore, we must strengthen and maximize impact of the South-South and triangular cooperation as diverse, vital, and inclusive modality of international cooperation, capable of offering relevant solutions and to take on board full scale of its advantages in order to strengthen implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I really was particularly taken by your inclusion of issues to do with the multilateralism and the support for multilateralism that can be promoted, of course, by South-South cooperation, as well as the importance of digital inclusion. We all have seen what the impact has been of the increase in the digital divide because of COVID. And so South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation also ought to be utilized to enhance digital inclusivity and the role of digitalization in growth and economic development. Finally, also on the achievement of the SDGs, there's no doubt that South-South cooperation is going to be a critical factor in attaining the SDGs. Now it's my pleasure to turn to Ms. Alicia Barcena, our longtime colleague, one of my heroes, and one of the people that is so well known in our region. She's the executive director of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Please do share with us ECLAC's experience in leveraging South-South cooperation for sustainable development, particularly your great work in leaving no one behind. Ms. Barcena, over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm connected. I'm not sure. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to speak in Spanish, so let me make everybody aware. Quiero saludar.
I'd like to begin by greeting Ambassador Maria del Carmen Squef of Argentina, President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, and congratulate her for the meetings this week, along with other members of the committee, the Vice Chairs of Lithuania, Qatar, Portugal, and also Nigeria's rapporteur. I also greet the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, Abdel Latif, Ad Interim Director. Our region of Latin America and the Caribbean has today more than ever proven its historic commitment to South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation with innovative criteria of solidarity. In ECLAC, we have the South-South Cooperation Committee created in 1981, and since 1981, we have had a South-South Committee, which has been particularly important for our region. This is a committee whose purpose is to consider the potential for international cooperation for development. And every 2 years, we have a chair of that committee elected. And today, I'd like to say that we will be recognizing the government of Costa Rica. And I would like to highlight the very important role played by that individual. I hope that you can at least hear me, but the sound has been cut off.
19 se han evidenciado.
There have been a number of considerable asymmetries, and we have a number of challenges that we're now facing so that we can move forward with cooperation. Access to vaccinations is sad proof of how much work needs to be done in ensuring the provision of public global supply. There's a disparity in terms of access to financing and digital technologies and cooperation in all of its forms. The pandemic, along with the social discontent, has led to a breakdown in the healthcare sector, not just because of the priority that we have needed to give to life, to the environment, to health, to social protection, education, and food security. This is a serious health crisis in our region. We've been most affected by COVID-19. 8.4% of the world's population lives here, and we've had 30% of the deaths. We're the most indebted developing countries in the world, and this is where we're facing serious problems. We've lost the decade. Our GDP has dropped 7.1%. We have serious structural gaps. We have continued low growth, low productivity, unequal growth. ECLAC projects a rate of poverty of 33.7% and extreme poverty of 12.5%, some 78 million people. There's been increased unemployment, in particular for women, and achieving Agenda 2030 is at risk. And we're concerned about that because we may only reach 32% of the goals, and the others are on hold and even falling behind. Citizens in our region are impatient, in particular our youth and women, and that's why it's so important to re-establish our development paradigm based on equality and sustainability. And we believe that that's very important. We need to replace this culture of privilege It's a culture that's based on tax evasion, non-tax payments, and it's a culture that always puts those people ahead of others. But this has a serious impact on the private sector and on society as a whole. We need to take emergency measures. We need to ensure that everyone has access to the vaccines. We have middle-income countries in our region, and they have been left behind due to concessional funds, and I'm referring in particular to the small island developing states and the states of Central America. And so we need to look at initiatives such as suspending debt payments. We need to look at a multilateral approach to global taxation. This has to do with our classification as well as middle-income countries. We need to look at the situation of middle-income countries and their graduation from LDCs. We're facing a number of vulnerabilities, in particular in middle-income countries. And I think it's a good idea for us to have this summit for LDCs, because it's a great opportunity to talk about the issue of graduation. It doesn't just mean exclusion. It actually should lead to greater cooperation. This is a way of ensuring a greater cooperation beyond South-South cooperation. We can learn from our lessons. We have a concept of countries in transition which questions the GDP, using GDP solely for determining the level of countries. We should use other measures and look at other structural vulnerabilities of mid-income countries. We believe that development is a gradual process, so we should speak about a gradual approach and not graduation. We have to have access to financing, to savings, to capital markets, to investment, and to tax incentives. And this depends a great deal on our economies and how vulnerable we are to climate change. And I think it's very important to look at this work in light of what our countries have done and said on a number of occasions. Of course, Costa Rica, Guatemala, which has chaired the group, Chile and Uruguay, and strengthen our regional agreements and our regional commitments to cooperation, CELAC, CICAD, Mercosur, the South Pacific Alliance, and promote this interregional cooperation so that we have a strong, united voice vis-à-vis the world and vis-à-vis other regions. We need to have regional initiatives to promote exchange of knowledge, good practices, capacity building, and have a common space so that we can optimize our response to COVID. We have a great deal to offer. We have a very solid network of agencies for cooperation in the region. We have the Costa Rican agency, and we have Guatemala and Mexico as well, who promoted South-South and triangular cooperation. We have champions in the South, in the case of Cuba, for example, which has provided so much in terms of health care, in Chile, in Central America, Mexico, Venezuela. They've provided support to the Caribbean. There have been very successful undertakings in Nicaragua, in Mexico, Argentina. This South-South cooperation goes alongside with triangular cooperation. We've had the support of Germany. We've been partners for more than 40 years. The European Commission, Korea, Spain. They have addressed issues such as climate change, technological exchange, and digital cooperation, which is so necessary today. Undoubtedly, we need to have that transformative voice because our recovery is going to be different. We need to have a more inclusive and sustainable approach. And the challenges that we're facing is how can we redistribute global wealth and look at our debt and look at innovative sources of financing and new strategic alliances. Today, they're very important. COVID has put us to the test. It's been dividing the world. We have vaccinated peoples, we have people who are immune, and then there were other countries falling far behind. And so we need to have support, and it's very important to have a mechanism such as COVAX for triangular cooperation. There are a number of people involved in that effort, but we're far from guaranteeing fair distribution of the vaccination. Undoubtedly, the United Nations needs to respond with a reform of the development system. We need to be more strategic and coordinated in our approach. We have to have SDG platforms so that we can address SDGs with a single voice. But we believe that we need to move towards equality, put an end to poverty by 2030 for sure, and build greater authentic competitiveness using technological capacities rather than extracting natural resources with cheap labor. Environmental sustainability and growth must respect the limits of our planet. We must revitalize the process of regional integration in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we can be very productive in the areas of health, tourism, and, of course, digital inclusion, because we still have thousands of people who are not connected to the Internet. We have the platform Digital Agenda for Latin America and the Caribbean. We've been working on this digital inclusion for the past 16 years, establishing standards, etc. We have to share, dear colleagues and friends, we have to share patents. It's very important. We're prepared to participate in climate action, in reducing carbon emissions, but we are looking for developed countries to help us in some strategic areas such as vaccinations, technologies to reduce our carbon emissions and energy transition. And to do that, we need political, tax and social, regional, national compacts. We in ECLAC have been promoting sustainability and working to overcome these economic, social, and environmental gaps. And so if we can work together on developing medications, providing medical supplies and vaccines, and work with regional providers and consortiums, we can have clinical tests and set up common regulatory systems. This is something that we've been proposing through SICA and CARICOM. We need to rethink our approach to development, and we therefore propose that it's urgent for us to have a new social political compact with new coalitions and institutions. And I would just conclude by paraphrasing a great Mexican who said, if we are divided regionally, then we will not be united internationally. This is one of the greatest fears that we've had. We want to free ourselves from fear. We want the freedom to have, we want religious freedom, freedom of thought, and that's what the United Nations has fought for historically. We're not going to go back on that. On the contrary, we're going to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barcena. You, of course, have covered a multiplicity of issues that are so important and germane to this issue of South-South cooperation and the problems we face. We're looking, of course, at the asymmetries that have been exacerbated by COVID, the issue of access to finance, the breakdown in healthcare, the fact that 30% of persons who have died in the region, the persons who have died in the region constitute 30% of overall deaths, even though it's 8.4% of the entire population. The level of indebtedness, I come from Jamaica, I know that we are among one of the most highly indebted countries per capita in the region, in the world. The drop in GDP, the issue of women, and of course middle-income countries, One of the things that I would love to hear about from you, perhaps later on in the discussion section, is the work, the incredible work you've done on multidimensional vulnerability index and how that can be used as a tool or as a mechanism for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. Of course, the digital inclusion issue is something we've spoken about before, but I do look forward to our further engagement with respect to the multi-dimensional vulnerability index as a new tool. As you said, we rethink our development approach and a new social and political compact to achieve true development. Without further ado, let me go now to our next panelist. The WHO has led the charge in the UN's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll now hear from the WHO Director General on leveraging South-South and triangular cooperation to ensure equitable and inclusive access to affordable vaccines and therapeutics. Director General, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, the COVID-19 pandemic is having a devastating impact on the poorest and most vulnerable, the majority of whom live in the global south. And yet, many of these people lack the tools to protect themselves. At the World Health Assembly last week, I called for a global effort to vaccinate at least 10% of the population of all countries by the end of September, and at least 30% by. Priority must be given to health workers and other at-risk populations in low and middle-income countries. As long as the virus continues to circulate, variants will continue to emerge. The pandemic will not be over until transmission is controlled in every country. The pandemic has also demonstrated that low and middle-income countries cannot rely solely on imports of vaccines and other health technologies. Just this week, the World Health Assembly adopted a resolution on strengthening local production of medicines and other health technologies and called for further North-South and South-South development cooperation. Voluntary sharing of licenses, technology, and know-how can help to end the pandemic and to build a healthier, safer, fairer future for all of us. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General. Needless to say, we agree completely that South-South cooperation can be a really impressive and important mechanism for solving COVID. Finally, our final, but last but not least, panelists, I welcome Ms. Cedaropolis. Partnerships have become an important vehicle in addressing the SDGs and also in the COVID response. So can you tell us more about the mechanisms to strengthen multi-stakeholder partnerships, both South-South and triangular, that address these important objectives? Over to you, Ms. Cedaropolis.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening to all delegates, excellencies, all protocol observed from a very cold Johannesburg this evening. As you said, Chair, I'm going to talk a little bit about mechanisms to strengthen multi-stakeholder partnerships and reflect a little bit on our own experience here in South Africa and at my institute in terms of the networks and the partnerships that we have fostered as part of a broader network of Global South institutions over the last few years. But first, I thought it would be useful because to reflect a little bit on what the COVID pandemic has taught us, because it speaks directly to why it is so absolutely critical to deal with, to take forward the concept of multi-stakeholder partnerships, which not only is encapsulated in the BAPA plus 40 document, but it's also very much of the way in which Agenda 2030 is conceived and its approach, and also from an African perspective, very much one of the dimensions of Agenda 2063, the African Union's Agenda 2063. I think it's true to say that when we reflect on the last 15 or so months of this pandemic, we all have to appreciate the central role that the state has played in countering or in combating the pandemic. But the state itself, or any state, requires both the requisite capacity as well as the institutions and the systems and the infrastructure in order to respond effectively. And we have seen some of these differences across the world. Leadership has also, of course, been a critical component of that. And within that, the importance of strengthening public health systems. We know, and we've known for a long time, that dealing in a vertical way with particular ailments and health challenges can only get you so far. That the importance of the system as a whole, the health of the health system as a whole, is critical. It's also been very clear in terms of the pandemic how critical social trust is, and that social contract, which also I think Alicia Bárcena referred to a little earlier. And social contracts are also key, I would argue here, for building multi-stakeholder partnerships, because any partnership is only as effective as the trust and the contract that exists between them. And we've also seen how critical collective action is and solidarity, not only at the domestic level, but also at the international level. And of course, we know that this has not always been in the volumes that would have been desirable. We've seen the acceleration of inequality. The gender gap has become even more acute. Vulnerable populations who generally bear the brunt of the highly informalized economies of many countries in the global south, and of course made even more acute by the digital divide, which highlights again a point which has been made by a number of speakers regarding the importance of technology, access to technology, sharing of technology, joint co-creation of technology is something I will come to in a little while. And while we probably can say that we haven't responded effectively enough and collectively enough to the crisis, it's not necessarily because we didn't have the knowledge and capacity, but often because in crises, all of us, I think, this is a human failing. We think about it in a narrow sense, in terms of how we deal with our immediate
Madam Moderator, it seems that the colleague has a issue of connectivity.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
okay.
Maybe we'll need to move on with the
Okay.
agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I apologize. I'm sorry that she was unable to continue. Hopefully we'll be able to get her back if possible. I did very much appreciate her exposition on the issues of capacity of institutions, of systems and infrastructure, because all four form the basis of the social contract among people. And that's very important as it enhances trust and the ability to support collective action and solidarity. So I do believe those are important issues to take into account. So, Excellencies, colleagues, we've heard rich ideas and experiences from our distinguished panel. Before I continue, I just would like to say that due to the fact that many, at least three of the panelists gave their interventions pre-recorded, they will be replaced in this interactive section in the following vein. We have Mr. Monwar Hossain, Deputy Permanent Representative of Bangladesh to the UN in New York, Mr. Ridas Petkas, Deputy Permanent Representative of Lithuania to the UN in New York, and Ms. Natela Menabde, Executive Director of the WHO Office to the UN, and Dr. Godfrey Zureb of PAHO. So having said that, the floor is now open for your questions and comments. In order to facilitate open discussion, we do encourage participants to save any written statements for the general debate. Now, first up on my list, I have Ms. Angela Ospina, DG of the Presidential Agency of International Cooperation of Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you, host. Thank you very much. Greetings from Colombia to everybody who is at this moment, this meeting. The goals set by PAVA plus 40 document were varied, and many called for deepening long-standing modes of work between our countries. At APC Colombia, we have explored the idea of interdependence during 2020 and 2021, and it's not a surprise that this concept is at the core of the intervention from the panelists in this session. We agree with you, the moderator, Mrs. Coke Hamilton, when you were talking about how to have a more important agenda or an agenda that means not returning to the previous patterns of consumption, exploitation, or pollution. We should take advantage of the crisis to aim for a greener, equitable, and sustainable economy. Whether we talk about maximizing the impact of our cooperation or promoting sustainable development to leave no one behind or addressing crisis through multi-stakeholders partnership, there is no doubt in my mind that the challenge of our time is joint action. Since Colombia entered the OECD 2 years ago, we have made special efforts to make our cooperation more professional. We are now more rigorous in our approach, and we intend to start providing technical assistance to other partners who are also on the path to graduating or transitioning to higher income levels. In this sense, we are hard at work at the UN Working Group for Measurement of Development Support to develop a methodology to account for South-South cooperation flows in contribution to the SDG 17. And we are also leading the action area on South-South cooperation at the Global Partnership of Effective Development Cooperation. We are piloting work with partners from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and we are getting great insights into how our partners measure their work and how they engage non-state actors to conduct joint development initiatives. An important lesson we have learned in this work is that one size does not fit all, and that there is an opportunity in South-South cooperation for matching technical cooperation with a financial component from the Global South. At APC Colombia, we will be exploring this line of working during 2021, furthering our strategic bet on knowledge exchanges as the most effective way to build resilience in our countries. And before I close, of course, there must be more and better triangular cooperation in the South-South cooperation agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Ospina. I have next up Rodrigo Carazo from Costa Rica. But I would like to say if anyone wants to take the floor, they can use the raised hand icon, and we will stream you in as soon as you do that. Mr. Carazo?
We will appreciate if the Secretariat can stream Mr. Carazo. So they may have some connectivity issue, Madam Moderator. So maybe if we have another delegation asking for the floor.
All right, fine. Let me, I understand Costa Rica is being streamed, but is not responding. So we're having some technical difficulties. Let me throw out a question to the moderator, to the panelists. The pandemic has revealed both the great potential and the vast divide in digital transformation. So what can South-South and Triangular cooperation partners do to leverage digital technologies for the benefit of all, leaving no one behind? And the UN development system has just undergone a big reform to make it more fit for purpose to support implementation of the SDGs at country and regional level. And the reform seems to have enabled us to better respond to COVID-19. And what does the UN need to do differently to leverage the opportunity of South-South and Triangular cooperation? If any of you would like to take that question, I would be happy to hear from you. The chair would like to have the floor. Ambassador, over to you.
Just based on what the panelists have said, in particular what Alicia Bacena has said, it's obvious that the countries in the South have been hit harder by the pandemic, both in terms of healthcare as well as in economic and social terms. And so this should be a warning sign to the international community with regard to the existing inequalities. The pandemic has further uprooted or shed light on other structural issues, economic issues, poverty, etc. Many of us have taken on debt. We have deficits, and this has impacted our economic recovery in our countries. We've also been hard hit and need other mechanisms for support, refinancing of our debts, additional financial support, conditional terms, and other efforts to help us with recovery. That notwithstanding, I'd like to highlight the efforts our countries have been taking. In the case of my country and many countries in Latin America, we have continued to ensure regional cooperation, and we've also been cooperating with other continents such as Asia and Africa. We don't need to create new mechanisms. Some speakers referred to creating new mechanisms, but we have a lot of mechanisms in the multilateral system. What we need to do is use those mechanisms and make them work right, and the states are the ones who are responsible for doing that. Moreover, I'd like to refer to something that was said with regard to access to vaccinations. More than 60 developing countries have requested fair access to vaccinations, and when the patents and investments came out, we wanted an opportunity to produce them in our own countries so that we could produce those vaccines and provide them to our people. To decentralize the global production would be a more efficient way for this our global economic system to work. There's no reason to think that that should be any different when it comes to vaccinations. When it comes to very specific vaccinations and financing for them, we believe we need to undertake this effort to overcome this pandemic and leave no one behind. And finally, I'd like to conclude my statement, and I thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor. I'd like to say that the outcome document of BAPA Plus 40 needs to be implemented effectively. And this requires commitment not just from the countries of the global south, but from developed countries as well, and the entire UN system, as well as the business and private sector. In this context where countries, developing countries in general and middle-income countries and LDCs, they've been hard hit in social and economic terms because of the pandemic. It's not realistic to think that South-South cooperation financed by those same countries which themselves find themselves in financial difficulties can achieve the SDGs without assistance. The spirit of BAPA Plus 40, beyond its commitments and agreements, calls for more involvement in international cooperation, and it really should be a realistic tool to ensure sustainable and fair economic growth and recovery for all of our countries. Today, more than ever, this spirit in which BAPA plus 40 was adopted, the outcome document was adopted, that really was the purpose for it. So thank you very much, moderator, for giving me the floor.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I understand that we have Costa Rica back with us now. I'd like to recognize Mr. Rodrigo Carazo from Costa Rica.
Distinguished Ambassador Squeff and distinguished moderator, on behalf of the Director General of for International Cooperation in Costa Rica, I'd like to greet you from New York. I understand there have been some technical issues in San Jose. On my own behalf and on behalf of my delegation, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank the panelists and Alicia Barcene, the Executive Secretary, for supporting the initiatives of countries which are members of ECLAC, and in this case, for supporting Costa Rica as the pro-temporary chair. We thank her for the support she's provided us through ECLAC by giving us a roadmap, giving us a united regional voice as we address integration and cooperation, and as we tackle the pandemic and adapt our approaches because of the pandemic. We attempt to do this without any discrimination or any increased inequality for our country. So thank you as well, Ambassador Squeff, for keeping the path open, the path that we embarked upon with BAPA and BAPA plus 40. So thank you very much to all of you, to Alicia Barcena, to ECLAC, and to our moderator for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carazo. I really appreciate your comments, and thank you so much for taking the time to come back to us. I recognize now, but before I do, I would like to say that Ms. Barcena had to leave, so Mr. Luis Yanes will replace her for ECLAC. So I'd like to recognize now Juan Miguel of Cuba, who's requesting the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you and the other panelists. I apologize for not putting my camera on, but I think the most important thing is for you to be able to hear me and to hear our contribution. We'd like to thank you for organizing this excellent event. I also believe that the information that the panelists provided us, they've shared with us their perspectives, and I think it's a very important discussion that we're having today in terms of what we can do through South-South cooperation to ensure the full implementation of Agenda 2030. I'd just like to respond to some of the comments I've heard from the panelists this afternoon. Certainly, we need to accelerate the implementation of the BAPA plus 40 outcome document and other previous documents. We need to do this so that we can fully implement Agenda 2030. And that being said, I'm very grateful to have heard comments from the Ambassador of Argentina, as well as the comments from our dear Executive Secretary. I'd like to thank her for mentioning Cuba's efforts to promote South-South cooperation. I would also like to highlight the work that Costa Rica is now doing in the area of South-South cooperation in ECLAC. They are steering our region to a safe harbor. COVID-19 has shown us that only together can we overcome this pandemic. And in order to do that, we need international cooperation, multilateralism, and solidarity. That being said, in order to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs, we can only do that if we continue to use tools such as the BAPA plus 40 outcome document and the Nairobi document. We, as members, are all committed to these efforts. In particular, countries of the South are committed to South-South cooperation and leaving no one behind. So we need to continue to implement these mandates and to promote South-South and triangular cooperation and recognize the added value of Agenda 2030. South-South cooperation, it should not replace North-South cooperation. It should be a complement to it. We should look at good practices, lessons learned, shared experiences, and look at areas where we can find common footing in order to achieve our goals. I'd like to express my gratitude to the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and the UN in general for all of its efforts to promote South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to ensure sustainable development. I would conclude by expressing our commitment to the Buenos Aires Plan of Action and express Cuba's will to continue to promote South-South and triangular cooperation to ensure sustainable development and the achievement of Agenda 2030. Cuba has been hard hit as well by the pandemic, and yet we've been committed to South-South cooperation. We've provided medical support. We've sent medical teams to more than 40 countries, and that's had a very positive impact. It's one of our national efforts that we have undertaken to support countries. We've also developed vaccines for COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan Miguel, and thank you for the continuous support that we as countries have also received from Cuba during the COVID-19 pandemic. We do appreciate it. Are there any further requests for the floor? If not, I will ask any of the panelists if they wish to take the floor. Perhaps maybe I would pose a direct question to Bangladesh. You know, how does Bangladesh integrate South-South and Triangle cooperation into its policy work? In other words, is there a national policy backed up by a department or a team? We also find that Bangladesh has been a leader in e-governance. How is Bangladesh sharing this experience with other countries? Would any of the panelists like to take the floor on comments that have been made or respond to the first question I asked or other questions raised?
Excuse me, moderator, are you giving the floor to Bangladesh?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for giving me the floor. First, I would like to let you know that, due to time difference, our Honorable Foreign Minister could not be present in live platform.
Completely understand. I am also at almost 11 p.m. my time, so
right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Before I start, speaking on your question and trying to shed a little bit of light on it, I would like to thank the chair, ambassador, permanent representative of Argentina to chair this session and the UN OSCC for organizing this thematic event. Our Honorable Foreign Minister has already said, how Bangladesh is actually developed and what Bangladesh wants from the collaboration within the South-South countries. So all the speakers and panelists and everybody has mentioned that, South-South cooperation is a must, in the futuristic aspiration of the developing countries. And at the same time, we do not, negate the importance of the North-South collaboration. We always say that it is complementary to the and it will further enhance the South-South collaboration. Now, how Bangladesh can contribute? If you compare Bangladesh's situations in 2007 and in 2021, despite many challenges, I would say that, that there are two challenges that we are now, trying to overcome. One is the climate vulnerability. That's quite obvious for Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is doing great, in facing and fighting the challenge. And the second one is hosting 1.1 million Rohingya refugees who fled their countries due to persecution. So despite these two challenges, you will see that in last about more than a decade or in 14 years, Bangladesh could increase their GDP, our GDP, more than 4 times. In 2007, Bangladesh's GDP was about $80 billion in nominal terms, and currently it is close to, $370 billion in nominal terms. So in that, since the population has also increased a bit, so our per capita income has also increased more than 4 times in that last 14 years. It is one of the amazing success and great, the great example of socio-economic development, which is done by our by the leadership of our current Prime Minister, Honorable Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. So it's a tremendous development. So how Bangladesh could have done it? There are a few issues. We all know that Bangladesh has achieved, women empowerment, trying to achieve the equality in education, and sometimes the girl enrollment ratio in the primary and secondary schools are even more than the boys. So other than that, one thing actually, I will say that the have played a catalytic role. You can say, we call it the digital Bangladesh. So when our Honorable Prime Minister assumed power in end of 2008, early 2009, she actually professed a philosophy, I would say that a philosophy of digital Bangladesh, which actually meant the knowledge-based economy. So, she tried to incorporate the knowledge-based economy with the digitalization network around the country, so that by 2021, Bangladesh could become a middle-income country. And you can see that Bangladesh has already achieved that. This year, the UN CDP, UNDESA CDP and the ECOSOC, and will hopefully soon the General Assembly would, recommend that Bangladesh will graduate to a middle-income country. So what is that digital Bangladesh? By digital Bangladesh, we are trying to actually share 4 issues. One is increasing the capacity, skills of the young population in the digital world. And second one is the e-governance. So I think probably you are one of the participants asked, what did you do for the e-governance? So in 2007, Bangladesh had only, I don't know whether I can share some data. In 2007, Bangladesh had only less than 10 digital services, but now we have more than 900 digital services for the citizens. And if you think about the mobile penetration, it was increased 8 times. In 2007, we had about 20 million subscribers, mobile subscribers. Currently, it is 160 million people having the mobile phone. Not all are smartphones, but at least they can communicate with each other. And the internet penetration now stands at more than 60%. That is amazing. And the other things also, literacy has gone up to 73%. The electricity used by the people is more than 90%. We are trying to get the electricity, 100% electricity users by 2024. The poverty level has reduced to around 20%. And the government websites, which were like 100 about fragmented websites in 2007, now it is more than 45,000 government offices have their own websites. And we have one-stop services. So altogether, the e-governance and everything is, it's skyrocketed, during the last decade or so. So that is the one example that Bangladesh could share, the experience Bangladesh could share with other countries. In that, keeping that view in mind, our Honorable Foreign Minister at the BAPA Plus 40 actually is proposed to host a knowledge and innovation center, South-South Knowledge and Innovation Center in Dhaka. We are still, offering that, hosting that office in Dhaka. If the we are already working with, or we will be working with the UN OSCC, to materialize that. And also our foreign minister has proposed to establish a forum of development ministers or finance ministers or foreign ministers of South-South countries so that they can share their experiences, and also to collaborate and make partnership with the Southern countries, for investment, for funding, and for cooperating and collaborating with the Northern countries, to improve actually improve the people's standard of living, and so that they can look forward to a future that they want. So with that, I would end here, and thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that intervention. You have outlined some incredible statistics here. No wonder Bangladesh will be moving on to middle income status. Congratulations. I do agree that digitalization has and will continue to play a catalytic role for so many countries. And it was really appreciative of your government and your prime minister to actually have the vision and see how this could actually transform the economy of Bangladesh. Definitely digital penetration is something that is going to be more and more important as countries seek to continue to develop and move out of poverty. So if Bangladesh, we should probably look at the Knowledge and Innovation Center that you have proposed as a South-South mechanism for sharing. That's one concrete issue that we probably should seek to pursue in the context of the BAPA Plus 40. If there are no other requests for the floor, what I would like to ask is perhaps go to Lithuania. When discussing COVID recovery and building back better, greener, and more equal, there's some quick wins and there are longer-term structural changes that need to happen. How can South-South and Triangular partners address these challenges together? You had referred to the whole issue of triangular cooperation and South-South and how this could actually assist, how Lithuania could assist in that process. Would you be able to expand on this a bit for us?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Can you hear me?
I can't see you. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Pardon?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I see. Okay, some issues. Well, so perhaps I'll proceed without video.
Yes, please proceed. Yes, we can hear you.
Right. So as in case of our colleagues from Bangladesh, our Vice Minister also is not available to participate in this interactive section of the meeting because of time difference. And if I may, just to start, to extend my thanks to the chairman of the high-level committee on South cooperation, and also to yourself, Madam Moderator, and to other panelists for their presentations. And we do value this discussion. And as you raised the question addressed to our delegation with regard to COVID-19 recovery and possible involvement of mechanisms of South-South and triangular cooperation. So I would say that, yeah, certainly we do see quite large potential in such a framework of cooperation as regards post-COVID-19 recovery. And as was mentioned by our Vice Minister in his intervention, countries of South should make use of existing mechanisms like Accelerator Act A and also COVAX facility. And I would say that in this respect, triangular cooperation would be of essence while assisting countries from South. I would say Lithuania as a developed country and being member of European Union is quite willing to extent possible to assist and to participate in the different projects as regards eventual engagement with South countries via triangular cooperation, which was strongly emphasized in BAPA plus 40 outcome document, which has been mentioned by our Deputy Foreign Minister, was co-facilitated by our permanent representative and permanent representative of Uganda. So more or less, perhaps this is it as regards your question, Madam Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I do appreciate your input. We now have a request from the WHO for the floor. Yes? Ms. Nata Menate? Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for organizing this very interesting session, all the organizers, and WHO is very pleased to contribute to the success of this session. As Director General of WHO has already mentioned, we are just out of the World Health Assembly, where several important resolutions have been adopted, more than 30 in fact, and many of them are of course related to the COVID response situation and related activities, but they also cover a broader range of issues, and many of them are very relevant to the discussions we are having today, with so many interesting examples shared by the panelists and speakers. I think what we all know, that we definitely need to increase the scope and the scale and look so much broader into innovative solutions which can make so much difference at the country level. And triangular collaboration is in particular very important in this regard. What WHO has done so far is that we have mainstreamed South-South collaboration across our policies and programs. And our 13th General Program of Work is really strengthening and re-emphasizing organizations' role and commitment to help develop and scale those innovative solutions. There are many activities across the world, and each region promotes in its own way such collaboration. In particular, maybe I'd like to highlight some of the examples from America's region, where health sector has been particular beneficiary of strengthened South-South and triangular cooperation, and it has continued to increase its magnitude and scope over the years. So some of those examples include maternal and child health area in the area of northern border between Haiti and Dominican Republic, for example, or issues such as road safety related work, which is one of the main causes of mortality in the Dominican Republic based on the experience of Costa Rica. We have also seen quite impressive examples of tackling antimicrobial resistance by leveraging the best practices from Argentina and implementing them across the Caribbean region, and also issues which are relevant also for the COVID response, like strengthening public health laboratories through provision of equipment, but also training and testing in countries such as Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean region, while facing the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are many opportunities, and as Director General Dr. Tedros has mentioned, right now we are very closely looking at the equal access to vaccination, but also at the production. And production involves a lot of capacity building, a lot of regulatory area strengthening, and also technology transfer. So there is a huge scope for strengthening local manufacturing capacity for tests, for medicines, for vaccines. And I think this should be one of the priorities, not necessarily on the cost of compromising production of other medical and health goods, but we need to think more broadly about common public goods for which investments are needed. And these investments require very strong collaboration between various sectors and economies and political institutions as well. It's imperative really to bring triangular collaboration at a really another level if we want to see difference in the post-COVID world. And another example or another issue I wanted to specifically mention is that we need to be more effective in sharing best practices and lessons learned. I think there is an amazing resource developed by the South-South collaboration initiative, which is publication of the good practices, and third volume is now coming up, and we have contributed to that with health examples from various member states. But we need to do more, and this can be around training of the across regions and countries, like, for example, we have done on universal health coverage and coronavirus crisis challenges and responses, maintaining essential health services while responding to COVID-19 and how to do that. We have done seminars on post-COVID world across regions, especially, of course, at the WHO PAHO work is worth mentioning here, but other regions have also been doing a lot of collaborative training events with other agencies such as UNICEF, UNFPA, and several others. So I think we need to do more to build back better, making cities resilient, looking at the urban development from a very different angle and seeing how the South-South collaboration can be expanding into this area. So I think the scope is very big, ambitions are big, but we all have to scale up our own work and invest in partnership across sectors and across partners to see better results over time. I thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of the WHO's work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Menabde. Really appreciate it. It's clear that WHO has been doing extensive work on the sharing of best practices, of promoting collaboration across the South, as well as triangular cooperation. And truthfully, what you have been able to do during this crisis, during COVID-19, has been nothing short of phenomenal. And congratulations to you and your organization for this. It's really been a powerful testament. So thank you so much. I'd like to recognize the chair, Ambassador Square.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I agree with you that everything that's been shared with us by the representative of the WHO has been very enriching and very good. We need to focus the work of this committee. So the issues that were raised by the representative of the WHO actually get to the very heart of the matter of concern to us in Latin America as a region and the world, and that is the pandemic. So I think that we need to do everything possible to have use practical examples and not get involved in lengthy statements, but to have examples that will really be helpful to us. When it comes to access to vaccines, as we said at the beginning, we did everything possible to have patents, and Argentina began to work on a patent based on an agreement we signed with Russia to produce their vaccine here. We also had an agreement with China so that we could produce vaccines in our own territory. We wanted to work with Mexico as well to produce vaccines for our region, and a great deal has been done by Cuba as well, the sovereign vaccine that they've created. So these are just some of the examples, moderator, that we've wanted to shed light on and to make sure that they count, because we can show that South-South cooperation does indeed exist. It's not just wishful thinking. Having said that, I'm certain there are many other very good examples of global South cooperation, and they can be brought to the table in our discussions as well. I want to speak about connectivity. The United Nations is quite concerned with the issue of connectivity, and no doubt we've learned a great deal during the pandemic. But I would say that if you just have connectivity, you don't solve everything. You don't solve food security. You can't eat connectivity. It doesn't solve the pandemic. So connectivity is just an instrument and not an end in itself. And in these meetings, we should give connectivity the space, the relative space that it deserves. So thank you very much, Coordinator. I'm not sure if you heard me, because I saw your attention was distracted somewhat by a message I think you received.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, no, I was actually taking notes. I take notes when people are speaking so that I can respond and follow up on what you're saying. I heard very clearly your comments with respect to connectivity and not being able to eat it. I agree completely with you. I think it is important to recognize, though, that this is part of the movement forward. and the importance of ensuring that we can do this accurately and well. I do not know if anybody else wishes to take the floor. I did want to follow up with ECLAC on one final question. There's been much discussion on a multidimensional vulnerability index, and of course we know the region has been leading the debates on this. How can an MVI assist in achieving Agenda 2030, and what's the role for South-South and triangular cooperation? Yes.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Moderadora. Muchas gracias por la consulta.
Thank you very much for asking that question. I just want to confirm something that's obvious, and that is if we were just to sum up an idea about development, it would be Agenda 2030, 169 goals, 16 targets and indicators. It's obvious, it makes sense that we need to take a multidimensional approach. We always should have, because development is complex, as the agenda shows. You can't just sum it up with one or two indicators, namely focusing on GDP, for example. So the more indicators of vulnerability that we have, the better. And that's really urgent when you look at the situation we are experiencing in Latin America and the Caribbean. And when you look at the particularities of the subregion, the realities in the Caribbean, that their reality is different from the reality of Latin American countries or Central American countries. We share a common goal in our region, but we need to recognize our differences. That's very important. And ECLAC has always taken that into account. And the experience of the pandemic has shown us that we need to really participate more. We need South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, and the support of the UN. The Secretary General has proposed a very ambitious approach to development, recognizing all of our vulnerabilities. So thank you very much, Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Yanes. Okay, final question before we close. I just wanted to ask the SSIA, how can multilateral organizations such as the UN support Africa in taking advantage of the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution? Just very quickly, if you can address that, we'd appreciate it, and then we'll close in about 2 minutes. Would that be great? Thank you. Are they available or they left? Oh, she's offline. Okay. Thank you so much. I really want to just close by outlining the critical importance of the South-South and triangular cooperation in addressing the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we've seen the necessity for a new approach to development and the exchange and sharing of technology and knowledge as crucial in moving this process forward. We also note the importance of digital inclusion and digitalization as a driver for development. The implementation of the BAPA plus 40 is critical. And we need to ensure that we have a specific roadmap that allows us to do that. We also have to look at the scope for strengthening the production of vaccines and other global public goods and investments, and the importance of building institutions, capacity, infrastructure, and leadership. The whole issue of a social contract and trust, and sharing of best practices and how important that is as we move forward. But the idea that South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation is going to be central to recovery from COVID and to pursuing priorities, being led, of course, by many of our own countries. We know that Argentina has played a very, very pivotal role in moving forward on the BAPA plus 40, and has also been one of the key elements. One of the areas I wanted to mention, and it hasn't been mentioned here, but the GSTP is the only formal trade agreement that exists among countries of the South. And I wonder if it is something that countries would be willing to re-engage at some point to see whether it is something they would wish to pursue. That's a generalized system of trade preferences, which was launched about 42 years ago. So thank you very much. I turn the floor back over to Ambassador Squeff. Thank you so much for your leadership in this. Thank you.
El sistema generalizado de preferencia.
Just recently, the issue of preferential treatment, that's an old system that was used in developing countries and in developed countries in their relationship with developing countries. It was a good system at the time, but it was really one way. The developed countries give preference to those sectors and for those products that they want. There's no other option for the South to make those arrangements with the North to determine the percentages for preferences or the products. We've been beneficiaries, if you will, of that system with the European Union, and that lasted for some 20 years. And it's rather relative, but it is also, of course, another possibility. Perhaps it would be a better possibility for the Global South, but I believe that we have concluded our discussion for this afternoon, and we have come to a close on accelerating the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals through the effective implementation of the Buenos Aires outcome document of the second high-level UN Conference on South-South Cooperation while responding to the coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, and similar global crises. I'd like to thank the moderator for steering the discussions. The highlights of the discussion and recommendations emanating therefrom will be reflected in the report of the high-level committee and as deemed appropriate by the working group in the draft decisions of the committee. The working group will hold its first meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'd like to report, as you will recall, that it was agreed that Ms. Dalia Salkuskiene of Lithuania will serve as chair of the working group. Distinguished delegates, the plenary meeting is adjourned until Friday, 4 June 2021 at 3 p.m. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
¿Se cortó?
Yo ya estaría, no sé si usted salió.